It's the summer. The summer is it's so funny because, you think that the summer is going to slow down, but it's just a different kind of thing you're doing.
Oh
Know what
my
I mean?
gosh, yes. Yeah, yeah. Well, and also, I mean, some of the same things. I mean, routines, things that you do every summer. For me, last weekend it was going up to the cabin. And we have a whole host of traditions, routines built around that. Uh, so so yeah, yeah. And it always just seems so short. I was just talking this morning with someone about this, about how uh, as you get older, time compresses.
Yep.
Um, and when you're young, summer seems like it goes on forever. Like it's just all this time, and the world is yours, and you leave the house in the morning, you wake up, at 10 or whatever, because you're a teenager and you sleep in, and you throw on your clothes and you call your best bud, and you go over and to his house, and then you guys just spend all day just messing around. You bike to the beach, or you go over to play some video games at another friend's house, or go listen to your friend's garage band practice. And it's just like all this time just it lasts forever. Every day is 10 years long, and you never want it to end anyway. But then when you get older, oh geez,
Yeah.
I mean, all of that seems like it happened just yesterday because time is so compressed. Then
Mhm.
I remember it as if it was yesterday, and I'm like, wait, that was 50 years ago or whatever. That was 40 years ago, right? Yeah, I'm 57, so that was 17 was 40 years ago, and I'm just
Well,
mind blowing when you think
it
about it.
the summer's always been interesting for me because a week ago, a little less than a week ago, as this airs, I turned 51. Right, so
Yeah.
I'm in that. I'm in that. I mean, we're well into it. And by the way, the other thing is, as a parent, when summer happens, you're like, okay, when do they go back to school? When do they go back to school? We all think that way, even though I mean, but as you get older, like I know that my daughter leaving would be like that. Like it's the summer I have with her is precious because this is the
Yeah.
last full summer she's going to be here before she lives
Yeah.
in her new. And my son, who's going to be 15 later this month, time with him is getting more. It's getting more compressed. So not only
Yeah.
are we,
Beatrix being 17, same
yeah,
thing.
yeah, and we know that, so what's interesting is that those things change, like the time that you're spending, all of those seasons change, even though they show up consistently. Every summer is still going to keep showing up until you're out of summers, and same thing with every other season. But the way they sustain themselves is very different. And I think what happens in the world of personal productivity and time management, or really anything outside of that, is we get confused with we get consistency and sustainability confused in certain things. So what I mean by that is,
Hmm.
um,
Okay.
we can. There's only certain things we can sustain, and there's certain things we can do consistently. Very rarely are you able to do like it's hard to find that. At least I feel this way. To find where consistency, you're sustaining something consistently, and there's no friction, right? And I think sometimes
Hmm.
people focus so much on just be consistent, be consistent, be consistent. But if you can't sustain the thing, like find out if
Mhm.
you can sustain it first. Uh,
Mhm.
don't put the cart before the horse. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and I think that, you know, last week or last podcast, we talked about momentum,
Yes, we did.
right?
Which is,
Right?
again, sustaining is a perfect example. Like you can only sustain that momentum
That
aspect so
momentum for
much.
so long.
Yeah.
Right, exactly, right? And that sometimes momentum exceeds the level of that you can sustain,
Right.
right?
Hmm.
That you're pushing too hard, that you're pushing too fast, that you're trying to do too much,
Yeah.
right? Um, it is, if you want, sustainability, the first thing probably you should do is decide, like, what is your kind of zone level,
Right.
get in the zone and, like,
Hmm.
you know but that flow, that zone, that it comes from kind of being in that state where it's not too hard or it's not too little, where it's just that right amount, right?
Yep.
And where you're kind of just there working through, and you kind of just know that, like, wow, I can just continue to do this forever, right? And it's not so much about it's almost anti-productivity in a way.
In some ways, I mean, it's funny because one of the things I wrote down was unsustainable systems often mask themselves as sustainable through momentum. So, in other words, because the
Mm.
system is just there, and you're like, okay, well, we're just going to keep the ball moving because the system allows it to keep moving. Uh, but there's the human element. Like, there's the
Mhm.
person, like, behind the system, the person working within the systems. That's probably more accurate than behind the system, but working within the system, that's where you're introducing the nuance. That's where you're introducing
Yeah.
the subjectivity. And that's where, if a system or a framework or a process can't be sustained, that's where it's going to show up. Not necessarily in the
Mhm.
system or framework or process itself, but in the
Yeah.
user, the end user, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think that's that's the hard part, right?
Hmm.
That's the part that's really tricky to navigate, and that most people don't have a handle on.
I just finished having a conversation with Chris Ducker about this. The idea of, and it just came to mind because we talked about his new book, The Long Haul Leader, and he talks right at the beginning about hustle has a season, not a lifestyle.
Oh my
Like it,
gosh, yes.
oh, it's so good. I
Yeah.
mean, Chris has been through it, right? So, and members of my Time Crafting Trust Premium community have the opportunity to catch that episode's not coming out for a couple months because his book's coming up. But you can pre-order his book. We'll put in the show notes just to kind of get a bit more out there. But one of the things that we talk about is patience. And what's interesting as I was thinking about this is sustaining hustle is not possible, like in terms of that.
No.
But sustaining patience can be just as challenging.
Oh my
I've run out of
gosh.
patience. There's a very, very
Oh my
specific term
gosh.
for that, right? Like, and
Yeah.
and you often associate that with a person or a
Yeah.
situation, but you don't
Yeah.
necessarily associate with internal versions of that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of hilarious. My wife, who would love to be a gardener. She would love to be someone who has, a beautiful garden is filled with all of these things, all of which she's acquired for free, of course, because she doesn't like actually paying for any of this stuff. Um, but every year she'll get something that she's dug up from somebody's yard for free, at
Hmm.
their invitation, obviously, and plant it in the ground and water it, and it'll kind of die off, and she'll be like, "Oh, well, that was a waste of time," or "That's not coming." I'm like, you're not patient enough. I mean, the gardening takes more patience than she actually has. I'm, or she'll encounter some I don't know, small bush in the garden that'll be looking scraggly, and she'll be like, "Ooh, I guess we're about to lose that one." I'm like, no,
Yeah.
you can't. Yeah, you can't say that in one season. The truth of the matter is that you have to wait, right? And sure enough, almost every time, I mean, I don't say I told you so, but I will, say, you know, next year,
Hmm.
um, did you notice that rhododendron's blooming?
So for us, this is actually really interesting, sorry, because this summer what we did is we decided no more full gardens. we put like crushed rock in almost all of our gardens, including like areas that we're not going to grow anything that used to be grass, because it's like, what's the point?
Mhm.
It just turns up brown.
Mhm.
And so we
Mhm.
literally bought 6 to 8 yards of gravel and have
Wow.
it
That's a
looks
lot of
great. It
gravel.
looks great. But here's the thing. And we've lived here for over 20 years. So I want to be
Yeah.
we have we have been fighting a war with weeds in the Pacific
Yep.
Northwest since the dawn of time, right? Because
Yeah. Yeah.
because of
Yeah.
just we don't get the snow, right?
Yep.
Things that do grow here are hardy, right? So including the
Yes.
wheat. If the plants are
Yeah.
hardy, the weeds are going to
Yeah.
be even hardier, right? So we
Right.
just decided, okay, if we're not going to go all in with gardening, which means weeding, like you're gonna have to
Yeah,
spend
all
basically
yeah,
all your
yeah,
time.
yeah.
We ultimately decided, all right, let's go gravel pretty much everywhere, and we've got pots, so we've got isolated pots with plants in them. We also had to keep in mind that we have to have deer resistant stuff, because even though we live in this heart of a city, there are urban deer here and they will eat
Mhm.
whatever. So that why I bring this up is, if you want to become a gardener and you want to build on the momentum of, I'm going to start this garden, we and I'm going to use we as I view it this way, is I tend to go full bore, right? So it's like, all right,
Mhm.
let's do it all, instead of, and then scale back. It would have been so much better if we had made the decision a decade ago, even 5 years ago, to you know what, we are losing the war against the weeds. Let's just have
Mhm.
a garden that we can sustain. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
so you know what we have
And
now?
a small one. Yeah.
we we have those potted plants, and we used to
Yep.
grow food in
Mhm.
the ground, but we bought one of those tower gardens a couple
Oh,
years
yeah.
ago,
Yeah,
and
sure,
that's where we
sure.
grow and we have to
Yep.
maintain that, but
Yeah.
we know what we have to do with it. There's no weeding of it. The only thing I have to do
Yeah.
is I have to keep these little white moth caterpillar things away before because you can still get disease on these things and stuff if you're not careful.
Mhm.
But it's way easier for me to watch that than to go, okay, let me go through the entire property and find out all the stuff. So it's important to know, like, when you're eager and momentum is on your side, to go,
Mhm.
okay, hold up. We know this is going to go to slow momentum at the absolute minimum. So how can I make sure I can sustain the attention on these
Mhm.
things that need it,
Mhm.
as opposed to spreading it out so thin that
Mhm.
you're not focusing on growth, you're focusing on um preventative maintenance, as opposed to nurturing, right? Because that's all you're doing when
Yeah.
you're weeding. It's
Yeah.
like, I gotta. And so I can only imagine that it's not the opposite problem of well, this thing's not going to make it. It's the patience of, how many years am I willing to go through weeds every month of the year to get a
Yeah.
small yield, because that's all we were getting, because
Yeah.
there's too many of the weeds versus my wife and I basically going out there.
Right, right, right. And, you kinda have to know, like, okay, what can what is it that we actually consume as a
Yep.
family, right? At least
Mm-hmm.
as far as the vegetables are concerned, right? Um, One of the things that we've almost intentionally done this year, and once again, I'll go back to the free thing that my wife, free tomato plant, free collard greens, free this, free that, free that. She can't say no. She
Right.
can't just leave it for someone who's actually going to take the time to to plant that thing and to pick that thing and whatever. And so, one of the things I said, you know, this year was, okay, you know, we've got these two tomato plants. We're going to put those in containers. That will be enough for us. That's enough for salads,
Mm-hmm.
beginning in August, we'll have enough for salads, and probably a bit more left over if we need it, right?
Yep.
Um, one, pot of, like, so everything, it has to fit into a pot. It can't go into the ground. Similar to you, but
Yeah.
for different reasons, right? Because that is sustainable, and that, one of the things that's at odds with kind of my ethos is I hate waste,
Yeah.
I hate wasting this stuff. Like, I
Hmm.
hate seeing the tomatoes rot on the vine because I can't pick them fast enough,
Yep.
or seeing them rot in my refrigerator because I can't eat them fast enough or on the counter.
There's
Um,
only so many
you know,
caprese salads you can eat.
that is correct. That is correct.
And BLTs you can eat. That's so
Exactly.
so
And
what I would say is, because I know that people, I mean, I even saw visually like, difference between consistency and how are they at odds? They're not really at odds. I guess it's we get
no.
we conflate. So if consistency would be, say, the regularity, right? Like this is how
Mhm.
regular. So
Mhm.
you can be consistent in, like, we meet once a month. That's consistent,
Yeah.
right? And we've
It's
done
habits. It's
right. Uh,
right.
Maintenance would be short-term upkeep. Actually, this is a great example of that. I would say
Mm.
maintenance is, because to me sustainability is long-term viability, right? So here's an example. We're actually exercising that right now, because we normally meet on the third Friday or the fourth Friday of every month to record,
Yep, something like that. Yeah.
and it didn't
Mhm.
work this time because of the
Yeah,
holidays. Again, summer,
yeah.
right? We talked about that.
Yeah.
So us adjusting the schedule to record the same day that the episode is released, because once we're done here, I'm shifting right into editing mode, which is my daily theme. That's another way to kind of sustain. That's a sustainability effort on my part. Once I'm done that, I'm going to go right into the production of this episode, get it out there. And before anybody knows it, the podcast will be up and it's fine. That is short-term upkeep.
Yeah.
That is us getting,
Yeah.
I mean, we have a rhythm that was broken.
Yep.
That happens. So now we're going to get back into rhythm, and that maintenance gets us back into rhythm, and the sustainability is the long-term viability of it. Now, if we decided that, if this kept happening, which I'm not saying, I mean, if it did, then okay, can we sustain this? Because clearly, if we're having to do upkeep every month or every other month or whatever our tolerance level of it is, then we're like, okay, so we're not being consistent, which means we're doing more time doing maintenance work than sustainability work, or sustenance, or whatever you want to call it. We need to make a change, whether that's we're going to meet on the first Friday, or whether we're going to meet, the week prior. And Mike, you need to adjust your habits, like whatever that looks like. So I think that, like, if you're looking for, and maybe you're not, this idea of, okay, well, what's the difference between being like consistency, maintenance, and being and sustainability in this context, it would be, to me, consistency is the rhythm, the cadence, how often.
Mhm.
The maintenance is, okay, we need some short-term upkeep, and I'll have to come back to, like, I'll have to check and see if there's anything wrong with it. So it's the refining, it's the optimizing, whatever you want to call it, or even just the fixing. And then the ability to sustain, the sustainability access, is the long-term viability, which which
Yeah.
which I think is, I mean, look at the systems we use for our own stuff. Paper. I mean, at the end of the day,
Yeah, oh, yeah.
using paper and
Yeah.
pen is most sustainable, because number one, apps come and go, right? Number two, you will maybe not have to work with a team over the long haul. Number three, maybe you don't want to upgrade your technology. Number four, maybe you just decide, as we speak about getting older, hey, I don't want
Yeah.
to spend my time doing this because I've already got something that works, so I will stick with this. Like, we're
Yeah,
always doing this dance.
less electricity, less, harm to the environment
Yep.
overall. I mean, just a drop in the bucket, but hey, every drop counts. Um, yes, no, exactly. And, as someone who, as a professional hobby, restores houses, restores old homes,
Hmm.
in fact, um, that is, in large part for the purpose of sustainability, right?
Right.
This thing has lasted for 100 and X years. How do we make sure that it lasts for 100 and X, 200 and X, 300 and X more, right?
Hmm.
Um, and the neglect of it, right? The fact that I'm even having to do this stuff in the first place is due to, regular maintenance not being done. Regular things just general maintenance, general upkeep that should have been done over time not being done. And now here I am, trying to bring it back to a point where it should have been, would that have been done, right?
Right.
And that once it is at that point, the next person who buys that house, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, they shouldn't have to worry about it for a while, but eventually they're going to have to do some regular maintenance, right? They're going to have to continue on that path towards sustainability through upkeep with the regular maintenance, right? And so all of this stuff applies just to, like you said, not only to paper, to the houses, to your car, right?
Yep.
The difference between a car that gets 300,000 miles and a difference in one that gets 150,000 miles is maintenance, right? And the truth
Mm-hmm.
of the matter is that doing that regular maintenance and doing that, that general upkeep is the difference in that car's ultimate sustainability,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely. I want to talk about something because this came to mind as I was thinking about sustainability. I came across this news yesterday. There are, and this is again sustainability in the terms of the way people traditionally hear about it. Like, is this a sustainability environmental situation?
Right.
They're making baking bricks out of recycled coffee grounds. They're consistently working on this right now, and apparently they
Delicious.
Yeah. Apparently, and I saw this on a bunch of sites, so it's not just one because you have to kind of look. It's in Australia. There's these researchers that have found that they lower the bricks from recycled coffee grounds are cheaper and greener to make. So, and we know, I mean, we talked about gardening, right? Like coffee grounds going into a garden at a certain level, right? Like you can't just throw them all in there because it doesn't work again, there's a nuance. It's not like they all go in or they don't. I would imagine as they're building these bricks out of coffee grounds that some grounds might be better suited than others. I mean, it just depends on the process. But I think that what's interesting when I read that is, man, if they could fast track that in a way that's safe, right? Like maybe use it for outbuildings or something that's not going to like use it for or retaining walls or something where it's not maybe retaining walls, but you know what I mean. Decorative garden walls, let's say. Often the things we need to look at to sustain are right in front of us, right? So
Yes.
what I mean, and they may be hiding in plain sight. So coffee grounds would be a great example because you'd never, once you hear it, you're like, oh, well, yeah. I mean, if you've ever made an espresso and it's like, but also when it comes to things like daily theming, which I've talked about before, like the idea of, oh, well, this is new. Is it though? Because do you go to church? You go to church on Sundays, let's say, okay, well, that's a theme. Or you watch American football. Oh, well, guess what? Every Sunday, American football is on from this time. So we already are good we're good at aligning
Monday
that
night
stuff
football.
up. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We're good at, but when it's happening. And I think that that certainty element, it's once you've got that, that's where I think you need those to line up. The ability to have certainty and again, sustainability. If you line those up, as soon as uncertainty shows up, then you're back into that maintenance area. Let me take a look, right? And the thing is, like you pointed out, like a car, like a person, if you don't do the maintenance on an ongoing basis, then by the time you recognize the signal, or by the time it needs it no longer is sustained, you may have to go back to the drawing board. So I wonder if we should try to find ways to align with that more often in a world that doesn't necessarily feel like we can, especially as you mentioned off the top, that time is compressed for us. So it feels like it's moving faster and faster and faster when it really isn't. It just feels that way.
Yeah.
Is there a way to kind of say, for the listener here to go, okay, I need to set aside like 1 day a week or 1 day a month or whatever to kind of make sure that anything that I can't sustain, I either get to the level of sustaining or I figure out a new way or I just scrap it altogether.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's great, right? I mean, one of the things that I do at the top of every month is I kind of look at my big project list, and so I keep a daily log, and I do that in the Hobonichi Techo. And one of the things that the Techo has at the beginning of every month is kind of a area for like a monthly goals or whatever. I forget what the page is actually called, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not here within Grab's site,
Sure.
so I can't tell you. But it's got a page there, and one of the things I that prompts me to do is to sit down, to look at my big task list, and to decide like what actually can I get done this month, right? Or what projects can I move forward this month? And it's tremendously helpful. Whenever I'm feeling like, okay, I'm looking at my week ahead and I'm like, oh, geez, this week just looks insane. It looks crazy. It doesn't look like I have any time. Like, but let me look at that list and see like what is doable, what's sustainable to be able to do in the midst of all of this other stuff I have to do,
Right.
right?
Right.
Um, and there are times where I don't get to everything on that list, but I'll tell you, I'm very, very happy with everything I do. And what I didn't get to on that list helps to form like, oh, should it have been on that list there in the first place?
Yeah.
Like would it have been possible to get all this, and this done in a month? The answer is no. That was 6 things. Next month I should make it 3. And maybe I should take these 3 that I didn't get to and move them to the next month. Or maybe not, right? And maybe that's something that like, you know what? The reason I didn't get to these things is because priority wise they didn't merit. And maybe they don't need to be, parked there yet, right? And all of these things, right? But anything that anyone can do to build in the sustainable habit, especially at a milestone, and like we said, and like you've said many times, right? It doesn't have to be a date on the calendar that is random. It could be your birthday. It could be, the solstice. It could be, that you get to choose your own season for doing this and your
Mm-hmm.
own regularity for doing this, but to sit down and to really take a hard look at everything that you've got going on, um, and make some choices about like, is is this sustainable? Is the pace that I have set for myself this month sustainable?
Um, Last question before we kind of wrap up. Do you think that consistency gets the focus or the accolades or the spotlight because it's a young person's game where sustainability is more of a wisdom shows you what need, like, you know what I mean? Like, so for example, energy levels aren't as, I mean, they are important to monitor, but when you're younger, it's easy for you to kind of
You,
go further and
yeah,
faster and longer. But so sustainability or sustaining something doesn't come top of mind because it's like, well, whatever, I'm invincible, I'm immortal, whatever you want to look at it. I've got lots of time. But then as we get older, we're like, okay, well, hold on. Like, I'm at least in theory 2/3 of the way through. Maybe I need to be smarter about or wiser about the choices I'm
yeah,
making. So, and the reason I ask this is because I want listeners who are listening that are younger to give this more thought, because I really wish I thought more about sustaining things over consistency 20 years ago. because
Well,
I mean, I understand there's lessons within that, but still, it'd be
Mhm.
nice if I gave it more credence in my earlier years.
Well, so this thought just popped up in my mind as you were talking about that. Consistency is about action, sustainability is about time,
Hmm.
right? And the two can go hand in hand because they are one is about doing and the other is about longevity of being able to do something over time,
Right. One
right?
is more about doing. One is more about devotion. Maybe that's probably a better,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
something
yeah,
like that.
sure,
No,
sure,
I
sure.
just think
But
time might be, maybe attention is better because. But anyway, keep going.
uh,
Sorry.
yeah, yeah. Well, and so um, as we've discussed before, time is a limited resource,
Hmm.
right? As is and the whole purpose behind sustainability, right? One of the things that we discuss when discussing it in an environmental context, right, is about making things last longer, right?
Yeah.
Making things last. We want we want our production of goods to be sustainable so that the planet sustains for a longer time, right?
Hmm.
Um, those sorts of things, right? We're talking about a time thing. Um, I think, like I said, when we are young, time changes. Our perception of time is different than when we're younger than when we are older. And also part of that compression comes from knowing the knowledge, whether it's front of mind or back of mind. You still know that the time you have is technically running out. At the
Hmm.
beginning at about age 45 is to meet that midpoint, for the average lifespan. The average lifespan for someone in the West is like 79, 80 years old, right? And so you kind of know that at 40, 45, you're on the other side of that the amount of time that you theoretically have less, knowing, of course, that we can all die at any time. There is no rule to that, but you get
Yeah.
what I'm saying. Becomes less and less, and thus that compression that pressure begins to build even more. And so all of that is to say that um, yes, sustainability becomes far more important. And the earlier you start thinking about it, yes, the more important and the more directly impactful it will become.
All right. So we're going to wrap things up on that note because I think it's a great way for people to think about it, no matter what age you are. But Patrick, where can people pick up your book and keep up with what you've got going on?
Oh, let's see. PatrickRhone.com is probably the best place to start. That is not a destination. That is the beginning of a journey to all of the various things that I do. Because I have a lot that I do, a lot that might seem like completely disparate things, and that's because they are. But, um, you know, my my ability to spread out my attention actually goes directly to sustainability, right? That I'm able to sustain all of these disparate things because I have I never get bored of one thing. If I did any one of these things as my only thing, I would actually have they would be less sustainable.
Next time, we're going to talk about creativity. That's something that builds nicely off of momentum and sustainability. We're going to talk about creativity next time on our next monthly episode of PM Talks. Now that we're back to our regular sustainable cadence,
Yeah.
If you want to check out all the stuff related to this episode, you can go to mikevardy.com/podcast613. All the show notes are there, but they're also wherever you're listening to this podcast right now. You can
Yeah. And make
subscribe.
sure to check out Mike's book. Mike has a new book
Yes.
out, and that new book is all important and germane to this discussion.
Absolutely. It's called The Productivity Diet. As we're recording this, as this is released, it's actually on sale on Amazon for Prime Days. So both the paperback and the only on Amazon. So if you're listening to this within the first couple of days of this episode dropping, you can get it for a deal. If not, just go to mikevardy.com/lit and you can get it from a variety of places there. I'll talk to you next time, Patrick. Thanks for being here.
All right. Sounds great. Thank you, sir.